Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Huddle. It's Monday. I don't know about y'all, but I fell asleep yesterday at like 7:30 after I put my kid to bed. So I have had 9 hours of
sleep. Nap before the Patriots game? What were you doing?
I'm watching the Patriots game, please. No, I'm rested and ready, guys. Best part of your weekend.
Oh, I think that Eagle or the Bears Packers Saturday night. That game was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Well, look, we had a birthday party this weekend. I mean, a kid birthday party, so I technically have to say that. But I ended strong with a very nice Pats win.
Awesome, good. Just a little
wait, hold on.
Yeah, Rachel, what was the best part of your weekend?
Sleeping.
That was okay. All right, okay.
You know, it's funny you say that though, because there's a whole school of thought that says you sleep when you're dead or whatever. I woke up Saturday morning a little early, and I was like, you know, I wouldn't mind a little extra while I'm alive. I do like a good night's sleep. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, my daughter is now eating popcorn. She's old enough now to eat popcorn. So that is an adventure right now. And it terrifies me because I'm always terrified she's going to choke on it. But no, we had a fun movie night. So that's the other thing. Let's talk business, though, before we jump in. Guys, Sean said it best on Friday at the end of the show when he said, thank you guys for all the support, but that these premium subscription that we've now rolled out is a great way to support the show. If you guys like what you're seeing and, you know, want to help out, that is a great way to do that. And his call to action, we saw a whole bunch of people come on and subscribe for premium subscription. So thank you all. And we hope to continue to sort of see that support. Obviously, go to thedchuddle.com. You can sign up right there, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Definitely do that. And we just really we appreciate your support. So today's 5, we're going to talk Trump v. Powell. Obviously, a lot blowing up since last night on that. We'll talk about unrest in Iran. We're going to talk about the trench lines hardening on Minnesota in ICE, the Donroe Doctrine, and the latest there with Venezuela and Greenland. We'll talk about resistance versus renewal versus results. And for those of you who are not familiar with what that is, it's basically this divide on strategy for within the Democratic Party when it comes to 2028. But first, let's talk daybook. 10:30 a.m. The president's going to be meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio in the Oval Office. Obviously, Iran is going to probably be the top thing that they're going to be discussing there. At 10:30, Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to be speaking at the National Press Club on the future of the Democratic Party. She's certainly hyping this right now. I have seen.
Yeah, she sure gets to that. Yeah.
What's the play here, Dan?
She wants to push the party to the left. She wants to be influential. I'm not so sure after her complete disaster of 2020 that people listen to her as much anymore. Bernie Sanders and AOC, yes. Tree may fall and it may not be heard by too many people.
Dude, I love this because I thought about the narrative, right? But you're right, Dan. If she doesn't get a ton of people that report on this, and it's like, that really shows where she stands in the party.
What do you think on Rachel Maddow tonight? I don't know. I've not looked at the MSNBC or MS Now lineup, but I'm going to guess maybe or Jen Psaki, one or the other tonight. Keep pushing.
Not just that, but if you're her staff right now, this is where, like, I've done this before where you're out doing a press conference and you're like trying to get RSVPs. Hey, you're going to attend. And then you're like, I just need bodies.
By the way, nothing says Beltway, like the National Press Club. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, Dan, you're giving me so much Twitter content.
I was going to say, there's been a lot of coverage of this in the lead up to it, more than I would expect. But again, are people paying attention to it nationwide? That I'm skeptical too. 1:30 p.m. The president's going to be meeting with the Archbishop Coakley in the Oval Office. He's still the president of USCCB, right, Sean?
Yeah,
do we think this is about the Hyde discussions?
So look, this is going to be an interesting thing as far as I'm concerned. So the Archbishop is the chairman, as you point out, since 2025 of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. But it's a mixed bag. He's come out the Catholic bishops were very clear. They've come out against January 6th. They came out against immigration. But on the flip side, very pro-life. I mean, so like a lot of Catholic doctrine, I mean, there's a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to Trump in particular. I'll be interested to see how this goes with Coakley. But obviously, I was shocked to see it on the schedule to some degree. But Coakley is going to be very, very clear when it comes to Hyde that like this is non-negotiable. And as I said last week when we talked about this, both Concerned Women for America, the Susan B. Anthony list, Marjorie Dansfelder's Penny Nance, very influential, very clear in their statements last week. And I just don't, and not just that, but I know from the feedback that we got from our discussion of it, like the pro-life base. And when I talked to members of Congress on my show about it, they were like, oh, no, he didn't mean that. Like, they're very clear, like, we have to have this. And so they gave him a lot of grace on this.
At 3:00, the president's going to be participating in a signing ceremony of some sort in the Oval Office. At 4:00, he's meeting with the CEO of Tunnel to Towers Foundation in the Oval Office. And in other news, this is down in Texas, I believe. Yep. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is going to be visiting SpaceX and Lockheed Martin in Brownsville and Fort Worth. It sounds like Elon Musk will be there too.
Correct.
Again,
Oh, yeah.
Another sign that Musk is sort of back in the inner circle. The president was talking on Air Force One yesterday about how Starlink could potentially be helpful in Iran, right? So we'll talk more about that in a second here. But let's first, before we jump in, let's do a word from our sponsors. Sean?
Yeah, look, Dan and I, if you were paying attention to our social media this weekend, and don't worry, we tagged Rachel and everything, tried to get her a little jealous because we both posted our Cozy Earth bubble blankets. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you're watching football on a cold night right now. Nothing better than a Cozy Earth cuddle blanket. And Dan got everybody in there. His kids, you know, he got the dog. I'm very selfish. I'm all about keeping the Cozy Earth cuddle blanket to myself, but bubble blanket. God, I can't say it right. But I tell you, it was like I laugh every time I say this stuff because I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting there snuggling with my quarters, like my Cozy Earth pajama top, the bottoms. Like I'm full Cozy Earth most days. And that's, like I said, whether it's the joggers or the pajama bottoms, look, I admit it. The eye mask is fantastic. I'm man enough to admit that I got it's the best one. I've tried them all. I'm telling you, Cozy Earth. And if you just use code word huddle, you can get up to 20% off site wide. And I'm telling you, there's something for everyone. And it was on 2 of my family members' list this year. They checked out the pajamas and were like, can you get those for me? So if you got a birthday coming up, Valentine's Day, Martin Luther King, daylight savings, you find an excuse to get someone something from Cozy Earth. Use code word huddle.
Nice excuse to cuddle. February 14th, Valentine's Day. Get that.
There you go.
Get that blanket. Yeah,
that's a great call.
It is. I'll tell my husband. I'll make him get on that right away. Okay, let's jump in. Trump versus Powell. So federal prosecutors in D.C., the big news last night was they've opened a criminal investigation into whether Jerome Powell lied to Congress. This obviously centers on what he told The Hill about the bank's renovation of its Washington headquarters. DOJ sent grand jury subpoenas to the Fed on Friday. Now, look, we all know that the president has been going after Powell for a long time, trying to pressure him to lower interest rates more than he already has. But this is obviously a huge escalation. He typically tries to stay above the fray on this, but let's pull up our first element today and take a look at what Powell actually said in response.
I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
Dan, start first with how rare it is to see Powell actually respond to Trump, number one, but also in a formal video like that. But also, is he going to have a job by State of the Union? Over and under bet.
Yeah, I mean, two different questions there. Look, it is unprecedented, just like traditionally judges don't respond to political attacks. Independent agency heads don't respond to political attacks. But I think one of Trump's, kind of tactics is he knows they're not traditionally one to respond. So it's like smacking somebody around who has their hands tied behind their back and, a muzzle over their mouth. I would just say to both of you, is there anything Jerome Powell said that isn't true? There isn't. I mean, that's the thing that we're all going to sit there and say, but it's Trump. It's like always the next statement. So look, I think he will be gone. State of the Union, maybe shortly thereafter. I'd say sometime between, spring break and then. But I mean, look, I've said this kind of over the last 14 hours. I think Republicans will rue the day if this goes through that the president of the United States took over interest rates. I just think it's terrible for our economy. Nobody should want it. Everyone is human. Donald Trump is not right about everything, as he likes to kind of brag, or his supporters like to say. And I think the idea that the president of the United States will now control the central bank is what happens in banana republics.
Sean, is this a little overkill here? I mean, typically it's Congress that is the one pushing and referring DOJ to investigate or charge somebody with lying to Congress. It's not usually the administration itself that's the one pushing that. Lawmakers on the Hill are not doing this. This is 100% a Trump admin-led thing. Is it overkill?
So the interesting thing about this was how it all went down. And I think I just want to make sure everyone, Powell kind of called this out, right? It wasn't like Trump announced it. Or Jeanine Pirro announced it, or Congress announced it, to your point. Powell did it. And this is what I think is interesting. To Dan's point, it was a Sunday Fed response, no glasses, full video. It wasn't a statement. I mean, this is if you talk about calibrating where things are, for the Fed to do a video, not a statement. He had this was full glam, Jerome Powell style, as far as he goes. But
in a gray suit, gray tie.
Yeah, great. This was he was like, "Do you want me to amp it up more?" That's as excited as he gets. But a Sunday video out of the Fed, full glam, that's him screaming. And I think he exposed this for a reason, because he wanted to get ahead of it. But this wasn't the Trump administration announcing it. And so that's what I found fascinating about the way this all went down. Remember, this is critical for everyone who understands this. The statute is cause. He doesn't have to be convicted of anything. And so if you think about your own employment, if your employer comes to you and says, hey, you're not dressing appropriately, or the way that you're talking to employees isn't appropriate, you can be fired for that. It's cause. And there's a different standard when it comes to this position. So I think people have to keep that in mind. If the president just establishes the predicate, was there cause? It wasn't that you lied to Congress. It's that you had massive overruns, mismanaged, and whatever. He doesn't have to be convicted of anything. That's the difference in this case that people have to understand. Third, the Lisa Cook case is still before the court. And that will determine a lot of this. If the court rules that that Cook can't be fired, I don't think they'll go down this avenue. And this leads to my last point. I don't think he's going to get fired. And I'll tell you why. I thought about this. Think about the president's response. And I went and looked at this again in the last few minutes. Trump on Air Force One said, that's not how I want it to go down, right? In other words, when he was asked about it, informed that Jeanine Pirro had opened this case, he could have said, well, the Powell deserves it, blah, blah, blah. He didn't. He said, that's not how I want it to go down.
I think that's because he's seeing the reaction. I mean, Sean, let me ask you this. Do you think that Susie Wiles and the senior staff had no idea that Jeanine Pirro did this?
I can see a situation. I mean, if you think about all of the scenarios that have happened in the past couple of months where people went out and said, I think I know what the president wants. Look, I saw this in Trump 1. People think they know what he wants.
But not in this administration.
No. But I also think
very well run.
Jeanine Pirro has been a judge before, and I think I could see a scenario where she says, I don't want him to know what I'm doing because I think there'll be a conflict, and Powell could use that and say there's political coordination. I could see an honest scenario where she says, I'm going to do this, because remember, she didn't announce this. I think that the idea was maybe to establish the case and then maybe go to him and say, hey, we've got this case. What do you want us to do?
The senior staff. So you think the senior staff at the White House had no idea that Jeanine Pirro, this is a White House where
I get it. No, Dan, I'm well aware.
You blow your nose without permission and you're in the penalty box. But against his number one target, they had no idea.
Okay, so this is where we're going to find out today if there's back channeling leaks that come out that say we were caught off guard by this. She did this on her own. She didn't have our look. How many things have we seen in the last 6-8 months where somebody went out and freelanced something under the guise of, I think the president wants me to do this, and then got their hands smacked? I wouldn't be surprised if this happened. But to your point, Dan, this is kind of like, remember when I was there and we fired Comey, the idea was everybody hates Comey, so they'll applaud if we do this. I'm not sure even the people who don't like Powell may argue that, hey, I don't like him, I want him replaced, but I don't want it done in this way.
What does Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent do here? I mean, obviously, Sean, he has been a voice in the president's ear saying, don't fire him. Let's not go there.
Again, this goes back to what I just said a second ago, which is I actually think the way the president reacted to this, I wouldn't be surprised if he says, if Bessent checks in with him and says, hey, just want to make sure we're on the same page on Powell. And the president says, yeah, I don't like the guy, I'm going to replace him, but I don't need to get into another like legal jam. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the president's head's already there and it's not some kind of convincing.
Another thought on this, watch lawmakers on Capitol Hill. We've talked about it before in recent days, a lot more sort of pushback from the Hill right now when it comes to congressional Republicans.
Well, not just pushback, right? We talked about this morning when we were on News Nation, but Tom Tillis, who's on the banking committee, has already come out and said, no way. I don't think there's any question where Murkowski is. And now you're down to you got two more to spare. I could easily see a world where McConnell comes out just because. 100%. And then Collins, I actually think could be interested because you talked about this last week, Dan, but like the smackdown that she got on use of military force could be hey, you did it once, let's not do this again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And just a reminder that Tillis has veto authority on the Senate Banking Committee. He's not only criticizing this, he's saying he will not support any other nominees for the Fed at this point.
I mean, they can bring it straight to the floor, but that would be, a pretty big thumb at your own conference.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to Iran. So President Trump is weighing options right now for helping the Iranian people. He has been briefed on a bunch of options, it sounds like, and it's going to be briefed again tomorrow. For those of you who haven't followed closely, we're up to 500. It sounds like more than 500 deaths reported. That's according to the AP. Likelihood is that the number is much higher. People are calling this a massacre. And the nation remained under this sort of internet blackout through the weekend. And the regime has sort of warned that if the U.S. interferes, they will target Americans and U.S. bases. So, Sean, when the president says he wants to help, let me rephrase this. So the president says he wants to help, and I feel pretty confident given the fact that he has, carried out strikes in half a dozen nations across the country. He's now calling for a more than 50% military buildup. He has no fear of doing something if he feels like he wants to. But what does help mean? Is he talking about a military strike? Do you think we see something less, something regarding cyber? What are you expecting in terms of help for Iran?
So let's step back a second. When you're in a situation like this and the president goes into the Situation Room, the team will present him with a full spectrum. We call them courses of action, COAs. And we'll say there are 5, usually, I mean, it's usually not.
Which is happening tomorrow. It's being reported tomorrow. He's going to get the menu of options. Yep. Right.
So they'll come in and the irony is, generally speaking, the military has a COA that they are pushing. So it's sort of like you can blow up the world, you can sit around and play with kitties, or you can do, and the idea is to get him, right? But in a situation like this, I can see, maybe a few more being presented to him. My guess is that, look, just let's go off the facts. President Trump does not like to see imagery of people suffering. That's just, I've seen it up close. So this notion of innocent civilians, of Iranian citizens being hurt, killed is going to impact him. At the same time, he understands the political ramifications of going into a country. And so my guess is that they really try to focus on non-kinetic things, cyber, going in, taking out the regime, focusing on ways to support some of the protest movements. But this is not like Venezuela, where you've got an opposition force and you're just talking about controlling the military. I mean, it's A, there's nukes. B, you don't know where the ball ends up. It's sort of like you're throwing a live ball out into a pinball machine and it's bouncing around. I just don't know that they know where does that ball end up? And that's the scariest part about Iran, is it's not just we're taking out the regime and putting in this person or this party. This is a lot more, I think it's a lot more precarious. Like, who knows who ends up at the top?
Yeah, I actually, Rachel, kind of disagree with your premise that Trump doesn't have any, qualms about military intervention. I think he has huge qualms for a multitude of reasons, including look, this is a big country. It's rugged terrain. This is happening in cities. So I'm not sure if he's just going to start launching missiles. You have the Israelis that are also kind of talking about what they're going to do. And to Sean's point, look, on the Sunday shows, the biggest thing was, and this was somewhat bipartisan, is we intervene. Does the government go to the people on the street and say, this is us against Israel and the United States, which
Right.
I don't know what the politics of that are on the ground. Historically, people rally around their own government a little bit.
Right.
So I think it is, who comes next? Who will provide the cover? What if the military goes into the hills and says, we're going to launch a civil war at the new government?
Well,
do us and the Israelis go in to provide the cover? I mean, this is why everyone has talked about support of regime change. A lot of tweets have been put out in the last 15, 20 years, but people have been very cautious about on the ground support.
Yeah, and that's all absolutely right. I mean, that's the thing, is that you are literally going, where does this end up? Who gets into control? What do we do? But let me just bring it back real quick domestically. And whether you agree or not, the administration is making a case in Venezuela. It's about oil. We, you, us will benefit. Greenland, this is why it matters for us. Okay, what's the case when you try to tell people why we're going to Iran? Right? I get it. I mean, because there's a stability issue. I mean, they have nukes. I think it's a lot harder of a sell to even at the greatest stretch to say, I mean, again, I'm for it. I understand the threat that Iran poses, but I still am concerned. So if you have to explain it to me, you're going to have a problem. And I think that's where the White House, beyond the strategic piece, needs to say, okay, how do we go in and tell the American people, this is why we're doing X, fill in the blank?
Well, and Sean, can I just add to that? Because I think this is going to go to everything we're talking about. We were in last weekend in Venezuela. He's threatening to fire Jerome Powell today. Now we're talking about Iran. We're about to talk about Minnesota. At some point, the circuit board of the country says, enough. This is overwhelming us. So even though you may have a good economy beginning to bubble up in various things, there just becomes this this is too much. And I do think, to your point, if we now start getting up to the line in Iran and it's an address to the nation, we are now going to go into support. I just wonder at what point the general population says,
well, it's not just Gen Pop.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you talk to MAGA, you've got a lot of folks on board on Venezuela, even on Greenland, because they get sort of, Bannon calls it the Manifest Destiny 2.0. Here's what we need to get, and here's why. Okay, got it. But this goes back to what I said a second ago. Tell me why we need to, what we're doing in Iran, because you can do Venezuela, you can do Greenland with bullying tactics, go in and be like, hey guys, we're going to own you. You can't do Iran like that. That's a little different. If you got a place that you've got nukes, you got to make sure that you're securing the nukes.
Yeah, I was going to say Steve Bannon, who he was just on his podcast over this weekend, saying, "Look, we've got our hands tied. We shouldn't do anything." I mean, not that everybody's listening to Steve Bannon, but he actually drew a red line on this issue. Okay, guys, let's move to ICE.
Can I make one point though, because I know we talked about Powell. The president also announced that rate, the 10% cap on credit cards. They talked about the housing. I mean, they are still trying to get that affordability message through to people.
Nobody's paying attention to that. That's
the point though, is that Dan was saying that when you've got all this stuff going on, it's hard to break through on an issue that you really want to, i.e., hey, we want to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. How are you going to get that through when look, we all flick around. We're the three of us tell me a show that covered it this morning. You announced that on Friday. He made a point of it last night on Air Force One. No one mentioned it this morning, at least that I can see so far on the morning shows.
I also wonder how his own party feels, because to be honest, I mean, to me, what's stunning about everything you just mentioned, because it's all true, and we were texting about this over the weekend, is Elizabeth Warren's going to speak today. This is all stuff she's been talking about. It is so progressive what he is talking about that it is. I wonder where his own party ultimately is. Like, are Republicans in Texas wanting to run on capping company dividends and buybacks, credit card interest rates? By the way, Trump told Fannie and Freddie to start buying more bonds to lower interest rates. Like, this is all the government directing economic activity. It's remarkable.
Sean, do Republicans vote on any of those proposals?
No,
I don't think they will. No, but look, I mean, you guys remember my anecdote
last week. Can't do any of it, by the way.
Well, being different, but yeah.
Remember, I mean, this gets back to what I've said over and over again, that there are things that are talking points and there are things that are policies. The president is going to continue to tell the American people, and he should, what I want to propose, what I'm working on, this is. I hear you. I'm looking at these things. Look, again, what do I tell you all the time? When I drive down the street, I got 2 gas stations. What do I look at? What unleaded is at 87, right? And so when you open your credit card and you go, are you kidding me? I'm paying 22.9%. He's trying to address an issue that's very visible to people. They see that. You open your credit card statement every month. You see that interest rate every month. You know what your interest payment is. It resonates. Those are things that matter to people. When you touch and feel something, gas, bread, milk, those are things that are very, very tangible in your life. Whereas there's some esoteric things that you might not, you may not open up your yield for your 401k, but a couple times a year or something. There are things that you see every day. The president's trying to make sure that he's addressing those.
Maybe he'll open government grocery stores.
I am curious to see,
in New York City.
I'm curious to see what Hill Republicans roll out in terms of economic policy in the country. No, but listen, like senior Republicans, the highest levels of leadership are talking about the need to do something. They need to vote on something. They need to have show votes, whatever, so they can go out there on the campaign trail and say, we're trying to do X, Y, and Z. We know what the president is going to say. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z on credit cards, whatever. But if the Hill is not on the same message, if they have a totally different, plan.
No, you're right. You're right. Because they have to. You cannot have a disconnect going into a midterm.
It's going to be potentially problematic. Okay, let's talk ICE in Minnesota. So protests obviously continuing over the weekend following Renee Good's death. But I want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in Washington, because, I said this on our 8 o'clock TV hit that we did on News Nation. Defund ICE is having a moment right now. It is resurging. Chris Murphy, the senator, Democratic senator, he released a package that would require warrant arrest for people, a ban on agents wearing masks, and basically limit Border Patrol agents from operating in cities that are far from the border. And today you are seeing news that lawmakers had to take out the Homeland Security Department funding bill from a minibus they were supposed to pass today because Democrats are pushing back on ICE policy. We have got a government funding deadline in just a couple of weeks, end of the month, guys. Dan, what is the likelihood we see Democratic leaders embrace some sort of push to defund or make significant policy changes with ICE?
No, they look, they're going to talk, and it's the base talking, and the leaders will pay some lip service. I don't believe they're going to shut the government down. I don't believe the majority of the caucus in either chamber is actually for this. What I do think is that just both sides continue to amp up the other by pushing to the extreme. ICE announcing that more people are going there to Minnesota. Technically, they're saying for fraud. The Department of Justice, the Department of Labor investigates fraud, but more ICE agents? I mean, it's like saying we went into Venezuela for drugs when Sean just said a second ago, no, we didn't. We went in for oil and this bigger regional play and like all these other things. So I think that you're going to see more protests. You're going to see the party get fired up. I do think we've talked about this before. The polling on this is moving against Trump. I do think he's beginning to run the risk that this is becoming just not popular because of what people are seeing on TV. It's going to fire up MAGA. It's going to fire up the Democratic base. But I think the middle of the road people just say, Jesus, like what is going on? Because at the end of the day, ICE agents aren't trained for crowd control. They're not trained for a lot of this stuff. They're being put in terrible positions. And Democrats obviously aren't helping themselves with some of these protests, but I don't think you'll see defund ICE.
Right. They're also not trained because they're supposed to get police support at the local and state level, and they're not getting it. But look, here's the interesting thing that I think about this dynamic. We started last week. I thought about this over the weekend, talking about Tim Walz and fraud and Nick Shirley's videos going everywhere. And then obviously we uncovered some stuff in Maine. The Lewiston city council member, who's a Somali, had to resign because of the connections there. And Republicans were riding a wave. Like, we got fraud. Everybody's now talking about getting, pulling back contracts and funding and denaturalizing people, et cetera. Then suddenly all this stuff happens with Renee Good, and the narrative shifts. Suddenly we're not talking about fraud anymore. We're talking about ICE. I think that this move by Democrats, this is their defund the police moment, and that they're going to go too far again. And the narrative is going to shift back again, because people, again, this is where you got to stay within the guardrails. And I think that Democrats like Chris Murphy, who are going way too far and talking about defunding ICE, at the end of the day, we saw what happened with open borders, right? So the ball pinged way too far. Biden and Democrats paid a price. These guys are almost like they didn't learn a lesson, and they want to go back to that. So this is where Democrats could totally change the narrative in the wrong direction real quick. The idea that you want to hold up government funding. And remember, DHS is the Coast Guard, TSA, right? So we're going to go through this all over again, and they're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Good luck on that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, just like a couple years ago, I remember reporting when
terrible.
Abigail Spanberger
Yep.
took, to this House Democratic Caucus meeting and just reamed out all the progressives about how defund ICE was such a disaster.
I just don't look. I can't imagine that Chuck Schumer and if you think about where those House races run through the suburbs of New York, the suburbs in Florida and Pennsylvania, and then you think about people like Sherrod Brown in Ohio and Roy Cooper in North Carolina and whoever wins in Maine. In no swing district do I see this playing. And I think, Sean, you made a great point, and this is going to be the fight for everyone to watch. Democrats were seen as extremely weak on immigration, and it cost us. I think right now Trump's beginning to see the pendulum to the middle has swung too far now to the right. And the question is, who can be seen as reasonable? And if we do defund the ICE, I think Trump will be seen as reasonable because something's better than nothing. Mm-hmm. But I think if we play this right, Trump looks extreme.
Look, and this comes back to what we talked about last week in terms of the media and whether or not they're doing their job or not, which they're not. This is what people see. And right now, to be honest, I mean, Dan touched on it, but it's in particular with ICE. This is where the administration has to be careful. When you turn on your television or the internet and look for what's going on and you see chaos, at some point, the people on my side go, you know what, we're cheering, go ICE, keep the borders closed. The people on the far left are saying open borders, defund ICE. But for a lot of folks in the middle, they just go, I don't know what's happening, but I'm tired of the chaos. And that's whether it's right or wrong. I mean, again, I think the vice president was right to call out the media's thing in this, and you know where I stand on it. But that's somewhat, it doesn't matter. What you turn on and see right now are images that portray a country, up in arms. And so when the administration doubles down and says we're sending more ICE agents in, I think a lot of people who aren't on Team Sean on the MAGA are like, whoa, what's the big threat? And that's where you've got to pump the brakes a little sometimes and say, okay, it's not that we have to stop, but we have to be a little bit more strategic about how we implement this.
So they shouldn't have sent more agents.
No, it's not that they shouldn't. That's just not the Trump way. You double down when you're, but I also think that it doesn't mean you have to stop. It just means that you've got to be, as I said, more strategic. So you can still do what you're doing, but maybe not so much in your face.
One thing on the Democratic side on this, I'm going to be watching Hakeem Jeffries in particular. I mean, I agree with you, Dan. I think that defund ICE is a terrible message for a lot of these swing districts that Democrats need to either flip or keep in order to win back the majority. But Jeffries, I mean, he has not shown that he's willing to tell the base no. He doesn't do it. And, it's going to come down to Chuck Schumer. And what does Schumer do? Because the big question is going to be the Senate, where they need 60 votes to pass an appropriations bill. Does Hakeem sort of go with the folks on the left and sort of put Schumer in a terrible position? We'll see if it ends up like
Can I make one point that I just want to go on record on? I know we got to move on. One of the things that I saw in a few videos this weekend, and then I heard a lot on the Sunday shows, is literally we now, I finally, and I don't know why it took me this long to come to this conclusion. We live in a world where two people can see the same situation unfold and literally walk away with two.
There's the Washington Post. Yeah.
I mean, but I didn't read the Washington Post, so forgive me. But what I mean by this is that, like, I feel like, in admitting my own bias, I'm pretty as I've said, I don't think Renee Good should necessarily had to die. Right? This escalated way too quick. But there, when people act like she by her own admission and by these signal messages that she sent and was involved in, they were trying to impede a law enforcement operation, a legal law enforcement operation. She did park her car illegally. She did not obey police officers. She did put her foot on the accelerator. That doesn't mean she deserved to die, right? But it does mean, like, everybody's acting on the left like she's literally a bystander with a sign on a sidewalk. And I'm like, that's, again, I'm willing to admit on my side that there should be an evaluation of what procedure followed, and at least give that benefit of the doubt to the situation. It's amazing to me the number of people on the left who are like, nope, she had every right to do what she did. And I'm like, she broke the law on at least 3 occasions.
Yeah. Let's move on. So Donroe Doctrine latest, Venezuela and also Greenland. Let's start with Venezuela. So the president is apparently very unhappy with the leaders over at ExxonMobil for telling him and the entire world during their Friday oil drilling meeting that going into Venezuela is, quote, Venezuela is, quote, uninvestable. He told reporters last night that he's inclined not to allow them to go in at all. Guys, just give me your quick takeaways from Friday's meeting and what you're watching when it comes to oil in Venezuela.
It's a problem. I mean, just for those who haven't seen it, you should go watch. I mean, it was matter of fact and very direct. I think, look, you have to add the fact that the United States is now telling Americans in Venezuela to get out because the gangs roaming the streets are looking for Americans to kidnap, to try to create some leverage. That is between businesses just being like, hey, here are all the problems that we see before we're going to go invest money, and our own State Department saying, get out.
Good luck if you're corporate America. Or
look, it all goes back to, how do you enforce on the ground your will? I still am waiting to hear the answer to that.
Yeah. Sean, thoughts on the oil meeting and whether they're going to move in?
I was intrigued by that because it was almost like we knew from some of the early reporting. We talked about it Friday morning. You had to have known where Exxon was coming in. That's the job of the Office of Public Liaison. Like, their job is to interact with those corporate companies ahead of time. I was surprised that, the president turned and called him out and said, would you like to talk? He was seated to the left of the president, like 5 seats, very prominent position. I was surprised that was, for lack of a better word, allowed to happen. I think it should have been gamed out a little bit more in terms of, I would have had even some of the smaller companies I mentioned who are dying to go in and get a shot there, or might be operating already to some extent and want to expand their footprint. I think that should have been gamed out a little bit more. I think the U.S., if we're really interested in bringing in U.S. companies, need to talk a little bit more about security guarantees, long-term prospects. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying you shouldn't be surprised that a company doesn't want to go do that if you're not willing to give them that. So I think there's a little bit more that needs to get laid out here.
Perhaps they thought the public pressure and being on camera, they would see a different result. I mean, it's one thing to leak to reporters that you're uncomfortable with this situation. Another thing to be in a White House meeting on camera next to the president saying this is not a good idea, or
and it was
we
more
are
than
concerned.
one, by the way, who said that. It was more than one.
Sure.
I mean, forget the other company that said we've had $15 billion worth of assets seized in the last 20 years there. I mean,
yeah,
it's a problem.
Money talks.
Yeah.
Greenland. So a reminder that the Americans are going to be sitting down with the Danes to talk about Greenland on Wednesday. Ahead of this, the UK and Germany are discussing deploying troops to Greenland to try to basically send a message to the White House. And the president is now saying we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way when it comes to Greenland. Sean, what is the hard way? He's not talking about military.
Go read Trump's books. He's negotiating. Right. I just don't know why. Like, everybody gets so spun up, and it's like it's all there for you to read how he does this. He's making it very clear. There's actually I was surprised as I went down rabbit holes this weekend. I mean, when you go back to the beginning of the 19th century, our interest in Greenland has been very, very clear. I think there's going to be a deal. And I wouldn't be surprised to see. I saw the former foreign minister out over the weekend from Denmark talking about they're willing to lean in a lot when it comes to U.S. presence there, U.S. opportunities economically. So I'll be interested to see what happens Wednesday. But, look, the president said last night at Air Force One, I want to be clear about this. If you don't like what he's doing and say, oh, we should back off, do you think that Russia and China are going to back off? Do you not think that they're going? I mean, you can laugh, but I think that, like, welcome to the world today.
Well, but hold on a second.
Russia and China are going to sit back and do nothing.
So let me ask you, I mean, there's two things that I'm laughing about. One is, like, so now Russia is a big deal, right? So I look forward to, like, we're going to surge troops into Ukraine because we can't let Russia win, right? Okay, so the second part is, go back to what Rachel just said. Germany and the UK, who fought 2 world wars, are now saying we may put troops on the ground in Greenland because we are threatening, not because not because the Russians, not because the Chinese, right? Greenland has a NATO backing. We have a military presence in Greenland today, as we have for I don't know how many, decades. So there is no fear. What there's a fear of around the world is that China has gone around the world and cut belts and suspenders deals for infrastructure all over the world. They have done it with carrots, not with sticks. And now we are saying to our own NATO ally, we might do this the hard way and we need more. It is bonkers. Now, I do think, though, to your point, he is going to get victory. And victory is probably some deal that gives us expanded, like, first right of refusal on minerals and some greater presence.
That leads to my last question on this, which is, Sean, like,
which is bonkers.
Sean, what do you expect out of this meeting on Wednesday? Anything?
I do. I think that what I expect is some good, positive, happy talk, which, I mean, the point is, I think that the Danes will come hat in hand a little and say, here's what we can offer. The U.S. this will be the first bid, which is, okay, we're making substantial progress. And then who knows? It depends on how far they lean in. But look, if you go back and look at history, we've had, prior to the current footprint that we have there, military-wise, we used to have a lot more.
Yeah, during the Cold War. Yeah,
I think that we can do that. But look, this really is, in a lot of ways, about the minerals and access to them, and also preventing China from coming in. So that's going to be a key component to this. So what else do we get out of this? Let's see. But I think it's good. I would expect a fairly positive meeting.
Let's do our last topic.
And by the way, we can't do it in context of what we talked about at the beginning of the show. You need a win this week. Do you know what I mean? Like, if this
there won't be a win this week on this. The Danes won't.
No. What I mean, Dan, is to your point earlier about, like, chaos or whatever. If you can get, let's say that you wanted 10 and you can get a 7.5 this week, you might bank the 7.5 to be able to say.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Let's hit our last topic: resistance versus renewal versus results. So Rahm Emanuel is once again making noise about 2028, and he's sort of making what you would call maybe an interesting bet here. He thinks that by the time we get to 2028, Democratic primary voters are going to be more interested in sort of focusing on rebuilding America's future, less interested on the resistance. He did an interview with Axios, and he said, there are 2 wings in our party right now. I hope to dominate one of them. There's the resistance wing dominated by Gavin Newsom, and there's the renewal wing that will be as forceful in fighting for America as the other wing is in fighting Trump. Dan,
can I ask the Dan question, though? I apologize, Rachel.
Sure, jump in.
I just want to know. I want to play my Rachel. But Dan, was that an insult or was that a compliment to Gavin?
Oh, that's the thing. He went after now. I mean, Ro Khanna's gone after Gavin. Now Rahm's going after him.
So that was an insult. He wasn't trying to say you. Right,
100%. He's basic. I mean, look, I've used the phrase kind of show horse versus workhorse analogy. But I look, Rahm is serious about this. And I think I added the results part because of Shapiro. What I think you're going to get are these 3 lanes that are emerging. I mean, we've talked about Newsom dominating the resistance. We've talked about Shapiro and kind of the Whitmers, the Brashears, who are going to say, look at what I've done in my state, and I could do this same thing for the country. Rahm, who doesn't have a sitting office, has come up with a clever line of kind of renewal in the American dream, of bringing things back, not make America great again, but I'm sure he'll have some other tagline. But I think it's interesting he went after him by name, because we all say this. Rahm is a great political athlete. He is unafraid to go at people. And now if you're AOC, if you're Kamala Harris, he's also beginning to box people in. Which camp are you in? And is Gavin Newsom the leader of that movement? You know, it's like when Trump was indicted and they went to DeSantis and everyone and said, are you with Trump or with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden? I'll be curious to see how these other people now react to it.
Yeah, someone just wrote this in the comments section that Rahm is delusional because he can't win a Democratic primary. I keep coming back. I keep coming back to the same thing, honestly, Dan. Like, he's just too centrist and too moderate for current primary voters. But you bring me to another point, which is there is a little bit of debate about his motives here. You have people like Ron Klain who think he's just doing this to position the party, to sort of move them in a certain direction. And then people like David Axelrod, who've known him for a really long time, who said, no, he's dead serious. You think he's dead serious. He wants to run.
Look, I think it can be both. I think he may say to himself, because look, he's done this throughout his career. Go back to when he was DCCC chair in 06. He took on the base. Now he had Pelosi behind him to help. But when he fired all those consultants who were DEI hires and said, you don't help us win, you are basically DEI hires. I mean, he was right. It freed up money to go to other things to win House races. But this is not new for Rahm to take on the base. I do actually agree with him that by 2028, I do think it'll become less about Trump and more about the future. You'll have to throw some red meat, you know, in terms of like challenging Trump. But the winning and the party's telling candidates in 2026, less about Trump, more about what you're doing to help people.
So one, I'll tell you this, he is serious as a heart attack about running. I know that. Secondly, look, the one thing I'll say that I admire about what he's doing is most politicians try to focus, like address the problem today and hope that it's the problem of the future. Rahm is betting on where the ball's going.
Yep.
And I think that's so many people don't get that. They create a solution about today and hope it holds for 2 years. It never works. Rahm, you can say what you will, but like all other things, when you bet, you hope that, you know, you're betting on the future. He's betting on where the ball's going. Most people don't do that. I think he's either really, really smart about this, but he also knows himself. And I think that's the third thing. He's not contorting himself and saying, okay, here's who I am. Let me contort myself to make me sound like I can fit today. He's saying, this is who I am. I bet the ball's going where I think it's going to go, and I'm willing to put all the chips there.
One of us wrote a Substack last week that said, is Gavin Newsom running the 2024 race, not 2028? Because Newsom's tactics are all backwards looking of like taking on Trump. But I agree with you, Sean. It's about where the puck's going.
Yep.
Yeah. And he's an acolyte of
go to danturrentine.com.
Rahm is an acolyte of Nancy Pelosi, and whether you love her or hate her, she's very smart politically. So we should definitely keep an eye on what he's doing. Let's go to some questions. Take some questions at your request. Last segment. Okay. Did Politico say that all the fraud we're hearing about is fake?
Oh,
so that's me.
I have not seen a story about that, but maybe some other people have.
No, so what I tweeted this out earlier, and I've got it. They put out a story, and that I will read because I made this point. They put out a story that said, "Brace for impact. Trump turns fraud into new weapon against blue states." And I replied, "German outlet Politico claims fraud isn't real." That's me. And what I mean by that is like, Nick Shirley posts these videos exposing massive amounts of fraud in the childcare industry, now apparently in the transportation industry as well. This dude in Maine resigns, whatever. Tim Walz says he's not seeking re-election. The first reaction of CNN is to question Nick Shirley, and then Politico turns this into Trump is weaponizing it, which it's just amazing. No mainstream outlet, except for News Nation, by the way, has actually done a story about the massive amounts. I mean, this is billions in fraud. And instead of embracing the story and exposing it, they're accusing everybody of weaponizing it. And it's like there was a story, a guy from one of the think tanks on a CNN show this weekend, and I got the clip of this where he said, this is on CNN. He said the fraud that he can account for costs every American $6,000, every American, and yet the reaction from Politico is Trump's weaponizing it. And it's like, weaponizing it. Why aren't you guys trying to figure out where it is? Why aren't all of these reporters saying how much more is there? What else is in healthcare? What is in DOD? But it's mind-boggling to me where the priorities of the media are. So
well,
that was my tweet about this, because instead of exposing it, they're sort of now trying to figure out who to blame for it.
Sean's favorite publication, Politico.
Yeah, I mean, the New York Times did start this all off, so we need to recognize that. But two, I will just say, because this is becoming more and more commonplace, the idea of there is a problem and we are going to target blue America. Just Sean, if President Rahm Emanuel went out and said, and his administration, we're going to just target red America. We are just sending people into Texas and Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, and it is red America. And I mean, cable news would blow their heads off, but it is so commonplace now. Fraud is everywhere.
I mean, look, I mentioned this last week. Greg Abbott, speaking of Texas, went out and said, great, I'm going to get a task force, look for it. If it gets exposed in a red state, then go for it.
Great.
But
send them in.
Send them in. Great.
Send them into Ohio. Send them into Florida. Do I think there's healthcare fraud in Florida? I sure do.
Sure. Go for it. Then, but Tim Walz didn't.
Send the troops into Tallahassee. What was Tim Walz's ICE agents in Tallahassee?
Fine. But here's my point. What did Tim Walz's reaction when he found out, when he was told about all this massive fraud? He defended the Somali community. He called
he told them to shut up. He stopped investigators from pursuing it.
Here's my thing. If there's fraud anywhere in America, expose it, find it. The reaction of Tim Walz wasn't like, thanks for finding this, I'm going to prosecute this. It was, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, this guy's a YouTuber.
But John, that's what cost him his job.
And fraud.
I mean, but that's what cost him his reelection, because it was such an incompetent answer.
Should put him in jail. I mean, literally, this is. I get so frustrated with the fact that we sit back and allow so many hardworking Americans to send money to Washington and then just allow fraud to exist as if it's. And instead, the Washington answer is just send us more money. Where is the effort to root this out? It's pathetic. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, in terms of like targeting Democratic areas, I mean, name a Democrat who comes out and says, ooh, we're going to make rooting out fraud the number one issue. I mean, clearly they're assuming, and maybe they shouldn't, but they're assuming that Republican areas are already sort of policing this area and that this issue, and that if it's a Democratic area, there's something happening like what happened with Walz. I mean, maybe it's
look, it's ridiculous. But it's just look, I think fraud happens everywhere. I agree with both of you. You should always, and I've said this for, the whole time we've talked about this the last couple of weeks, fraud is fraud. You should go after it. But do I think there is fraud in different forms in Republican areas? Of course there is.
Of course. All right, let's take another question. Apparently a lot of people interested in Greenland and Minnesota ice. Another question.
A lot of those people.
Yeah.
I can read one on my phone if we don't. Oh, there we go. Okay. The messaging from there it is. That one. Okay.
Yep.
Greenland, but mainly, what if Trump is just getting the rest of NATO to actually patrol and defend the North Atlantic, aka scaring them into action? What do you think, Sean?
That's a brilliant question.
Yeah.
Because remember, everybody got upset when he bullied them into living up to their own obligation to pay 2% and now 5%. So maybe that's part of it. But I actually think it's a brilliant question, because for too long, all of these guys have done. I mean, look, if Germany and England, France, Spain finally decide to do something about their own national defense, then this will ultimately be a good thing. Brilliant question.
And it sounds like the UK is sending some troops along right now, UK and Germany. So there you go. No, I mean, I'm skeptical about this being the play, because like I feel like we would have heard about it. Like somebody would have been like, oh, this is all a play for. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think the end of the day, this is about the melting ice caps around the Arctic. There's oil up there. There's minerals. We talked about this earlier. The reason we had a big base there during the Cold War is the fear that the Russians would go kind of underneath the ice and be able to patrol submarines up there. And so I do think this ultimately is a security play. The issue is they're not arguing with us that they're on our side. The question is just who owns it and who has the right to just kind of announce, hey, we're going in. So
Let's put up another question. I think we had one here. Okay. Question for the panel. Were you surprised at how relatively little coverage Powell's video trying to preempt Trump got? It's actually getting a ton of play right now. Sean, as a comm specialist, do you think that Powell came across as blah?
He is blah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I was joking earlier about him dialing it up by taking the glasses off. He was like, "Will this make me look excitable?" He had to do what he had to do, as we noted earlier. For the Fed to respond at all, in fact, is a big deal. The idea that he did it on video is a big deal. The idea that he did it on video on a Sunday night is a big deal. As far as how little coverage, again, Sunday night, the Golden Globes and an amazing Patriots win. So I think that it was a crowded field, to be blunt.
And Dan, you said it was dominating everything you were watching this morning.
Yeah.
Right?
I actually thought the timing was perfect, which is you put it out Sunday night so that, not much else usually is broken between 7 or, p.m. on a Sunday night and 7 a.m. the next day. So when we all text starting around 5 o'clock in the morning, what are we seeing? And I go through both the right and the left, various websites and news publications. I think everyone but CNN led with Powell. CNN led with Iran. Powell was number 2. And yes, I look at Breitbart and, all sorts of things on the right and everything to see what everyone's talking about. So I think it did penetrate. It was on cable news this morning. So I think from an execution standpoint, Powell did his team, they did a fantastic job.
Well, keep in mind, and I noted this earlier, he put it out himself, right?
Yep.
Jeanine Pirro didn't announce this to the White House. And that was one thing that Powell, I think to your point about if I were his team, I'd say, let's announce this. Let's get in front of it instead of respond to it. So I from a comms perspective, I think they did the right thing. And
no one looks at that video and says hothead. Like, he does come across as a dry, measured banker. And that you can just, you may disagree with what he's saying, although I don't think there's anything that he said that's factually not true. But now when everyone talks about his firing, that video is going to get played, and we fit it in 30 seconds. And so when you do a video like that, you say, what do we want the takeaway to be? It fits perfectly in this era of short, quick hitting bites.
And there's going to be another sort of wave of coverage of this tonight because lawmakers come back to town. Reporters will go to the Hill. They'll have like a list of questions they're going to ask lawmakers. And I can guarantee you comment on this is going to be probably the first thing people ask lawmakers about. So we'll see a bunch of pushback tonight, I think, from Republicans. Let's take another one. Question. The messaging from administration officials is for the citizens of Iran to protest injustice. Then they are sending ICE into our communities. Who is approving these conflicting messages?
That's an interesting way to phrase it. I don't think there's too much of a disconnect there. I mean, I think saying you're enforcing the laws of the United States with ICE, again, I may disagree with how they're doing it or what they're doing, but then also saying that the people of Iran have a right to protest. The troops in Minnesota, the ICE agents and the various federal officials are to protect the officers executing their job, whereas in Iran, it is people's just right to protest down the street. Right. But look, obviously part of the challenge in Iran, there's an internet blackout. So we're not really sure what's happening on the ground. And are these protesters blocking government officials being able to do their job? I mean, I have no idea. But it's an interesting way to phrase it.
Iran is a brutal regime. It's
no. I mean, look, can I just I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I assume that the person who's asking is trying to be like conflicting messages. ICE's job is to enforce the laws of the United States. If people are here illegally, they're breaking our laws. That is a completely lawful thing. People, as I said earlier, are 100% entitled to protest in the United States in a lawful manner. That means you can't obstruct a legal, lawful operation in advance of your First Amendment rights. That's it. The people of Iran being able to protest is not in conflict with what we're talking about. It's just not true.
Yeah, it's a brutal regime. I mean, people have no freedom there. Okay, let's do. Oh, it looks like we're at 9:30 actually. Yeah. So let's call it now. Guys, we will be back tomorrow at 8:30.
Like,
Sean, what do you have on your-
Sean, what do you
Yeah.
have? Who do you
Oh,
have?
well, look, I mean, obviously a ton to break down from over the weekend. Chicks on the Right are both going to be here to break it all down and go through all the media piece of this. Obviously, by the way, my post that I put over the weekend about Politico leaking its sources and passwords got over 1 million views this weekend. No comment from them. They did block me, by the way. I put that out. They now, my access has been denied. So we'll talk about that as well.
Fun times. I have a column coming up, I think tomorrow, on healthcare and, you know, this sort of shit or get off the pot question. I'm hearing increasingly from a lot of Republicans who are like, what the hell are we doing talking about a reconciliation 2.0 that tackles healthcare in the spring? So subscribe at rachelbade.com, RACHAELBADE.com. It's free. You'll be able to see that at some point here. So that's all we got today.
Can you do your name on TV? Like when you call somebody and they're
I
like,
don't.
where are we sending it to? Do you do that part where you go, it's RACHAEL?
You know what? People tell me they send me emails all the time and they get bounce backs. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Sure.
that's because
I
my
get
name is spelled absolutely wrong.
But it's like
So,
the
no,
United,
don't do it on
the
TV.
Ohio
Just,
State University.
Yeah. So anyway, but more importantly, go to the dchuddle.com and subscribe, guys. Go to our YouTube page at the DC Huddle. Click the subscribe button now. We're driving those numbers up. So if you haven't done it yet, go do it. We'd really, really appreciate it. And we will see everyone back tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Thank you.